Lawyers of Reddit, what is the dumbest thing your client has ever done? During a divorce, the ex-husband claimed that he didn't make much or any money and wasn't able to pay the child support we were asking him to pay. A few hours after receiving this information, he posts a picture on his public Facebook of a wad of cash talking about how ballin' he was. Needless to say, his claim didn't hold up after that. In his defense, people who post pictures of cash normally are poor. That's why they're so excited to have whatever money they do have. Not my client, but in a well-known prisoner civil rights suit, the prisoner, acting pro se of course, filed a motion to kiss my butt in which he requested that America at large and one corrupt judge bend over and kiss his butt. The motion was denied. I'm going to allow it. At first appearance, a defendant stood there calmly and quietly when the judge was reading his charges and bond information. When the judge asked if the defendant had any questions, the defendant gave the judge the finger and said, "Frick you, mother sucker, go frick yourself," and then proceeded to throw down the microphone and walk away. The judge, who had been on the bench for years, replied, "Well, I guess I'll let you know when my fan club meets." Bonus: the fan club has its own building, with free meals and exercise facilities. My sister is a public defender. She recently had a shoplifting case where the defendant was caught in possession of stolen goods which happened to match a list, also in his possession, entitled "Crap to Steal from Walmart." So he made a shoplifting list. Client was an accountant for a good size company. During the recession she was laid off and filed for unemployment where claimed she made $200k plus salary. Real salary was $60k. The company received the unemployment claim, investigated, and found out she embezzled millions. Not a lawyer or in any way educated on law and court proceedings and such, so please forgive my ignorance, but I want to ask something. Say you're in court and your client does something horribly stupid such as gives evidence incriminating himself, accidentally confesses. What do you do? Do you just sigh, admit you lost, and everything stops, or is there any way to salvage that? Just a curious question. So I'm a law student, but I work at a volunteer desk that helps people complete the forms for court. The awful part is I can't give any legal advice since I'm not a lawyer, which means I can't tell these people they don't have a case. However, the stories are great. They're the lady who sues celebrities. She asked me to help her sue Robert De Niro. Someone else helped her with a suit for Matthew McConaughey. She was doing it on behalf of her kids and their fathers for in excess of $100 million. She didn't even know how to spell their names. Then, there's the guy who is suing DirecTV, CNN, Fox, and who knows who else. Apparently, he's the one you have to THNK for putting color on your TV shows and adding animation. He was suing because they hadn't paid him, ever. Finally, there's the lady who is suing her former employer for giving her too much money on her last paycheck. She told me they did it because they liked her and wanted her to come back. There was maybe $60 extra on the check. She was suing for $10,000. Not a lawyer but in court for a ticket. Apparently the cop lost the ticket book, so there was no official evidence. The judge said, "The next 15 on the docket. I was luckily one of the 15. Just needed to say not guilty since there was no evidence." One moron got up there and started to argue that he was only going 5 miles per hour over, not 10. The judge looked at him and said, "Son, just say not guilty." The guy again said, "But I wasn't going that fast." The judge laughed and repeated again, "Son, just say 2 words for me, not and guilty." The guy, confused, mumbled not guilty in the form of a question. The judge said dismissed. Everyone in the courtroom laughed and clapped for him. I love that I'm 80 some odd in, and this is the first one that didn't result in the person destroying their chances in court. I'm not a lawyer, but the optometrist that I went to had an officer manager that was marking on people's accounts that they got refund checks and crediting the balance, then cashing them herself. She took $50,000 in a year and got caught. When asked why she did it, she said, "No one told me I couldn't." Airtight argument. So I was representing a kid accused of conspiracy to supply crack. He was accused of acting as a lookout, warning the others whenever the police were approaching. He had a fantastic case and it looked like he was going to win. On the day of trial he turned up for trial wearing a huge t-shirt with the Warner Brothers logo on. Above and below the WB logo was printed "If you see the pigs, Warner Brother." He refused to change. Nah blood, no white boy tells me how to dress. He was convicted. Not a lawyer but a legal secretary. It's illegal to kill crocodiles in Australia, so our client filmed himself and his friends doing it. Funnily enough, they got caught. Going to be kind of hard to disprove a video that clearly shows the animal being killed and subsequent celebration. Plus photos with the carcass. What an idiot. Another guy robbed the pub he worked for, stole the work ute, drove to the city, went straight to the casino, parked the work car in the lot, lost $10,000 playing blackjack, then bought $2.500 each and was entertaining them when the cops arrested him. Classic. There are probably others, but I've been doing this for 10 years so they've all blurred together. People are dumb. Not a lawyer here. Still in law school, but assisting lawyers with cases. One day, we got involved in a caretaking debate for an old woman. Her daughter and an attorney were declared legal guardians for her, due to dementia and her high age. Her niece got us involved questioning the motives of the daughter as an assigned legal guardian. Long story short, her motives were definitely questionable. She stole $10,000 and even her mom's vacuum cleaner and silver cutlery, which resulted in the poor woman eating with her fingers. And the case seemed to be a piece of cake for us. Then the niece, our client, took the old lady away to her senior citizen home to guarantee she was taken care well of. Her intentions were gold. Unfortunately, daughter and attorney were still legal guardians and had the right to determine the place of residence. In the end, our client was charged with kidnapping and we lost the case. Moral of the story: don't ever do anything case related before talking to your lawyer. Seriously, don't. My high school best friend's father is a lawyer, and I remember him telling me this story years ago. He gets a client who was being charged with a DUI. He asks the client what happened and the client states that he had 2 drinks, gets stopped, and the police wrongly charged him with driving under the influence. My friend's dad then looked over the evidence as any good lawyer would do. Come to find out, there was video evidence from a dash cam. Awesome. His client on video was visibly drunk, and he described it as being "you'd be stupid to think he was sober." He was convinced there wasn't much he could do with this. There's icing on the cake though. When the police officer went to give him the breathalyzer, his client is heard stating, "I'm too drunk to use this dink thing." I'm a law student but I have internship stories. We had a client who was convicted of murdering his stepson. Before passing sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say to the court. He replied, "I only fricked up when I didn't kill my wife too." Life sentence. Another client, upon being pulled over and being asked if he had any drugs or alcohol in the car, voluntarily told the office that he didn't but did have the he sold in his hotel room. He then kindly escorted the officer there and gave it to him. We had a client charged with selling C. In order to determine if he qualified for a public defender, the judge asked if he had any way he made an income and he replied, "Well, you know, from selling coke, I bet I can think of more too." My lawyer brother once got a contempt of court charge dismissed against his client by begging for mercy. Using a Forrest Gump-like defense, my client is not a smart man. Immediately after the charge was dismissed, the client turned and in front of the entire court punched my brother in the mouth. Yelling, "Who are you callin' dumb?" Client was promptly rearrested. Arguing for my client to be released on his own recog. The judge asks him where he is going to live. "With my fiance," he says. He spins a lovely tale about how wonderful his fiance is, how supportive. Did he mention they are having a baby and he wants to get out of jail and take care of his soon-to-be wife and kid to support them properly? The judge asks the courtroom, "Could defendant's fiance please approach the bench?" From opposite sides of the room, 2 women stand up and start walking to the front. One is about 4 months pregnant and the other is nearly 9 months pregnant. They are looking at each other with identical expressions of "Who the frick are you?" You could see the exact moment when each of them realized that B is fricking my man. The fight started before they even got to counsel's table. Pregnancy or not, these chicks were seriously trying to kill one another. The bailiffs had to stop laughing long enough to break up the fight. My client says, "Frick, Your Honor, I didn't think they'd both come." The judge said he was denying bail for my client's own protection. Not a lawyer, but a paralegal, and the list of dumb I've seen would stretch to the moon. The list of mean would be twice as long. Some examples: not a client, but a defendant who took revenge on his girlfriend by gluing down everything in her apartment. Glued pillows to the bed and couch, the ashtray and phone to the coffee table, and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. Going to add another dumb one: not showing up for court. Had a defendant client with a very simple traffic issue, but he would not come to court. Now, he had an attorney, a good one, who had negotiated a sweet deal, but since he wouldn't come to court, the judge put a warrant out for his arrest. No big whoop. We find the client, arrange for him to come to court on the next available day, and file the appropriate motions to have the warrant lifted. And guess what? He doesn't show. So now, his sweet deal is blown. He's incurred $600 to $700 in additional attorney fees for the extra work, and there's still a warrant out for his arrest. Dumbass. The glue thing sounds like art. I'd pay to see that. Not my client, but I saw this. Accused bank robber at a bail hearing was told by the judge his bond was set at $100,000 and explained to him that meant he could post $10,000 in cash to be released pending trial. He asked the accused if he had $10,000 for bail. The accused replied, "Judge, if I had $10,000 I wouldn't have been robbing the bank." The US attorney asked for a copy of the transcript. Easiest conviction ever. Client claims she was abused by boyfriend. Applies for non-molestation order, similar to restraining order. Gets drunk one night while proceedings are still ongoing and goes round to his house and shags him. He takes some horrifying pictures of their happy fun time and sends them to his solicitor, who forwards to us. Had to show her the pictures and tell her we can't go any further. Never seen someone run out of an office that fast. 1. Guy robs bank. Flees scene. His clever getaway plan is to jump into the nearest taxi, yells at the driver, "I just robbed that bank, now drive." Driver turns around, is cop. In haste, robber has mistaken police car for taxi. In my country taxis are white, so it is feasible but extremely dumb. 2. Guy is being questioned at scene of recent burglary, as suspect. When asked for occupation he says burglar. 3. This is morbid, but guy kills girlfriend after a fight at her house. Because he is smart, he then takes off all his clothes, leaves them on the bed next to her body, and sets it all on fire to destroy any incriminating evidence. Because he is really dumb, he does not realize until after running naked to his car that he left his keys in his pocket. Because he is really dumb, he runs back inside and tries to somehow retrieve his keys from his burning clothes. Becomes overcome by smoke and jumps out the window. Police find him lying outside with burns. He claims he was coming to visit his girlfriend, saw the house was on fire and ran in to try and save her. Is asked, "So, why are you naked?" Cannot answer. Edit. English. Not a lawyer. I watched a case play out in traffic court where the guy who went up before I did for something stupid that should have been a small fine completely lost his crap and started hollering about in the injustice of it all, and was carrying on about how America was going down the drain and being taken over by communists, when finally the judge lost his crap right back. It went something like this: "Judge, be quiet. Not one more word. I've heard enough. No more." Silence. "But Your Honor." Long silence. Judge looks down at the guy. "But, Your Honor." Not one more word. "But, I see this is difficult for you to understand. Let me say this exactly one more time. A last chance, so to speak. Not one more word. Your bailiff." So after watching the idiot getting hauled out of the courtroom, the judge bangs his gavel and it's my turn. I walk up to the judge's desk and say, "Well, I had this well thought out defense as to why I was driving without a license and expired tabs, but I'm just going to go with I was an idiot for forgetting both of them. Oh well, happens to the best of us. Show me your license and papers are current and we'll forget about it." After I showed him, I asked him, "So what's going to happen to that guy who went before me?" Probably going to sentence him for picking up trash on the side of the highway for a few weeks. Which was pretty dang funny considering this is Alabama in the middle of the summer. Ha ha ha. Defendant is at a preliminary hearing for a domestic battery charge. Alleged victim, his wife, girlfriend, whatever, failed to show up, so the prosecution dropped the case. The judge told the defendant it was his lucky day and asked if the defendant had anything to say about that. Defendant starts to explain his point of view on what happened and just about talked himself right back into that domestic battery charge. Indeed, if the judge hadn't been in such a good mood, he might have. Rule of thumb: if your charges get dismissed, STFU and GTFO. This happens constantly. Guy hires us to defend him against charges by an ex-girlfriend that he is stalking, harassing her. We get girlfriend to agree to drop the criminal charges if our client agrees to have a restraining order entered. This prevents the client from having a criminal record or risking jail time. After this is all worked out and the restraining order has been entered, Guy contacts girl. I spent the summer after my first year of law school representing children in the public defender's abuse and neglect docket. Basically situations where kids are taken away from their parents because of abuse and neglect. The parents and the government are also represented parties in these proceedings. Now the bar is set very low for parents. Basically they have to have adequate food, shelter, and supervision with no abuse. When kids are taken away, the moms, almost all parents in the system are young, single, and poor mothers, are told they can get the kids back by holding down a basic job, getting an apartment, testing clean for drugs, and breaking up with whatever abusive douchebag they are seeing. The number of mothers who couldn't satisfy these requirements were astounding. Failed drug tests, bad relationships, quitting jobs arbitrarily. I saw it all, and my heart goes out to all the children who drew those straws in life and ended up in foster care institutions and felt unloved. What about stupid lawyers? How about this one? Friend of mine once out of business with stupid partner, hires a highly recommended lawyer to handle contractual issues. He hands him over business keys, credit cards and mobile phone so that he can return them through proper channel. Over 6 months, former business partner's lawyer keeps sending threatening letter asking for return of said keys, credit cards and mobile phones. Eventually sues. Dumbass lawyer doesn't allow friend to come to the hearing, call him 1 minute before it starts, and never mentions he had said items all along at the hearing. Friend loses and has to pay damages. Oh, and lawyer sends bill the same day, then goes on vacation for a couple weeks. Needless to say, friend is hiring new lawyer to both appeal and sue former lawyer. My aunt is a lawyer and this isn't really stupid on the part of the client, more on the part of the DA. But they let a group of staff handle a critical piece of evidence before they had analyzed it without gloves. Ruined the case for them. Client got off. Client was friends with the DA. Remember when Burger King had those commercials that featured a guy with little hands who didn't want to be seen eating a Whopper? I had a guy come into my office and wanted to sue Burger King for defamation because he had little hands. To the guy's credit, he did have little hands. I had a client get popped for DUI. The officer didn't do a good search, so my guy ended up in jail with about 30 ecstasy pills and a gram of C. Afraid of being caught with that stuff in jail, a felony, he snorted a few bumps, took some ecstasy and gave the rest away. The deputies suddenly had 24 guys tripping balls in the receiving hall. They do a search and my idiot client still has the baggies in his pocket. He was also so fricked up at that point that he licked one of the sheriff deputies, which got him a battery on a peace officer charge tacked on. Not a lawyer but someone I went to high school with was arrested. He served his jail time and ended up out of jail on probation. He couldn't find a job to pay for his probation and court costs, so he decided to rob a bank. He walks into the bank and hands a note to the teller saying he's robbing the place and give him money. She does and he leaves. She flips his note over after he left to find that the piece of paper he used was the backside of his probation papers with his address and info all over it. He was back in jail shortly thereafter. Call me every day for 30-45 minutes at $175 hour asking the same questions each time just for reassurances on his case. His bill was over $10,000 prior to trial. While these aren't as flashy as most of the stories told here, I see them from my clients almost every single day. 1. Criminal. Confess to police immediately following arrest. Every dang day. 2. Civil. Pay me thousands in retainer and then refuse to do even minuscule things to further their case. It would amaze you the amount of times people have complained about their billing but have paid me hundreds of dollars an hour to fill out simple forms for them, that is, simple name, address, social security forms, and to go through credit card statements and bank statements to list the account numbers on a divorce property statement, etc. Simply because they are unwilling to do it. I have to call and conference with them and go through each blank on the form because they simply won't do it and return it in a timely manner. In more involved divorces, this can cost them thousands when all they need to do is sit down and list their assets, liabilities. You hire an attorney to do the legal work. You can save yourself a ton of money by taking care of everything that doesn't require legal expertise on your own. Throwaway account. I was a new mediator at the time, mediating a small claims landlord-tenant issue in a courthouse hallway. Limited civil jurisdiction mediations usually get their own room, but it's common for small claims to be done anyway. You can grab space outside the courtroom. The two individuals were about 20 feet apart and both sides were really upset, so I was doing a lot of going back and forth, listening and trying to drill down to common interests and what they could live with as a settlement. Eventually, the tenant starts getting more friendly and says he might be willing to compromise, which was really surprising to me after some of the things he had said. I chalked it up to my excellent mediation skills and went to speak to the landlord, who appreciated the tenant's gesture and said she'd think through some options we had discussed. I returned to the tenant, who by this point said, "Man, you know what? Really, it's no big deal. Let's just do what she wants. It's fine." This also surprised me, but after a few more minutes of me making sure it's what he really wanted, we had a mediation agreement signed lining up pretty much with what the landlord wanted. As I'm saying goodbye to the tenant, I look down and see him holding a joint by his side. He had managed to stand pretty close to a vent. Plus I was super naive at that point in my life and thought I had only been smelling weird BO. Upon quickly looking around, it was clear the hallway was relatively crowded, with streams of attorneys, clients, and bailiffs, the guys with uniforms and guns, going by. We were about 10 feet from a courtroom door. It wasn't until after he walked away that I realized he may not have had capacity to sign the agreement. TLDR. Smoking weed in the courthouse hallway with bailiffs walking by, and negotiating a binding agreement while increasingly high. On a site inspection with opposing counsel's experts. Expert. Can we please see the bolts that failed, causing the plaintiff's death? Client. No, those are broken. They were made out of cheap metal. That's why they failed. I almost slapped my client. Frankly, I'm sad I didn't. My dad once had a guy get caught for vandalizing and he was caught on tape. This guy wore the same exact clothes into court that he wore on the video. Since we're telling dumbest criminal stories, a girlfriend of mine was married to this piece of sleaze who had a dumb piece of sleaze friend. Dumb friend gets himself jailed because he robbed his own local bank branch where he did his banking. Despite wearing a cunning disguise, a ski mask, a teller recognized him from his frequent visits to the bank and told the cops. So he's righteously locked up. My girlfriend gets raided by the cops at 6 AM looking for the moderate crop of plants they've got planted in the backyard. She asks how the cops detected it and they told her. Apparently dumb friend had written them a letter from jail. Dear piece of sleaze and Fargle's dumb girlfriend. How are you? I am fine. How is your crop doing? I can't wait to get out so we can smoke some bitching weed. The drug supply in here is very unreliable, so I hope you are looking after that crop real well. Haha. Say hi to everyone for me. Love, your friend, one of the dumbest criminals ever. All mail was read by the prison censors, so they informed the cops and my friend and her piece of sleaze husband got busted. The judge ordered you not to touch anything in the storage unit where your husband's stuff is. So don't even go there. Breaks into the storage unit and pours bleach over everything. My dad is an attorney, and these stories are somewhat relevant. Backstory. Father's office is robbed and the guy took a bunch of our IDs, passports, social security cards, that we kept at my dad's office. A few months later, not sure of the timeline, my dad is in court for another case meeting. Guy enters the courthouse, going through security for a hearing for some unrelated charges. My dad gets called from his meeting and the security guys were laughing. Hey, get a load of this, mister. Spretty 21's dad. This guy says he's you. I believe he was then charged with robbing my dad's office. Another story. My dad is in a meeting with some guys who were unaware that my dad fluently speaks their native language. They were telling him one story in English, then would switch to their native language to confer about covering up the truth. My dad let them go on like this for a while before finally cutting in their language, and asking them about the real story. They were extremely dumbfounded and busted. This will probably stay buried, but hey, it's out there. NYC criminal defense attorney here. All inmate phone calls at the city jail, Rikers Island, are recorded. I remind my clients on a regular basis that somebody is listening to all their calls, and that they should never discuss the case or call anyone related to the case from jail. I had a client who was charged with stalking and harassing an ex-girlfriend. The thing about these charges was that this was the first and last time I had seen a legitimate case of double jeopardy, defendant being charged with the same crime twice. The defendant had already pled guilty and done a small amount of jail time for the same incidents. I walked into court on our first appearance supremely confident that my client would be walking out of court a free man. To my surprise, there was a second indictment charging new crimes. My genius client had called his ex-girlfriend and the day had recordings of him threatening to beat her if she came to court to testify against him. We took a plea right there and he served 3 years for witness tampering and contempt. If my client had only listened to my advice and let me do my job, he would have gone home 3 years earlier than he did. On the other hand, it seems like the system worked perfectly in this case. Not a lawyer, but my daddy's. His client was facing the death penalty and wanted to take the stand in his own defense. Basically, the guy was a crazy mother. Any words that came out of his mouth were 6 kinds of fricked up. My dad and the other 3 lawyers on his team advised him not to do it, kept him from testifying for as long as they could. But if a client wants to talk, they can. He gets up there and proceeds to read a 12-page letter. 12 pages of gibberish about how he wasn't crazy. He's on death row. I'm not comfortable that it's appropriate to tell stories about my own clients. So, 1. Recently I saw a defendant appear in federal court wearing a t-shirt saying 2 in the pink, 1 in the stink. 2. I prosecuted a bank robber. I think he pled guilty mostly to avoid having my show bank surveillance cam photos to the jury. C. He robbed a bank while wearing sagged pants. When they tried to leap over the half door that separated the teller area from the customer area, the pants came off and tripped him and he fell on his face. The cameras captured, in exquisite detail, the change in his facial expression from bravado to concern to terror as his pants came off. Actual case I defended. Woman using drive-thru ordered a regular-sized value meal at McDonald's. The restaurant had run out of smaller soft drink cups, and without telling her first gave her a large soda. Rather than saying thanks, she sued, claiming the unexpected weight of the large soda tore her rotator cuff. Litigated it for 2 years. Sexual harassment case. Our client, the business owner, went into court, looked the plaintiff up and down, and said you'd look better without the skirt. It went okay. Wasn't my client, but I saw this happen. Defendant moves to remove his public defender, apparently listening to advice from a cellmate. Def. Your Honor, I would like to represent myself. Judge. Very well. Will you be changing your plea? Def. Yes. I would like to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Judge. Do you have a mental disorder? Def. Number. After a brief chat with his former attorney, defendant reinstated the public defender as his counsel. My guess is defendant listened to counsel when he said that pleading not guilty by reason of insanity means admitting you did indeed perform the acts of which you were accused. Posting my mother's story on her behalf. She was a public defender and once got a client who was charged with reckless endangerment for the nth time. Can't remember how many. She tells him to basically be quiet and she will talk to the aider and see what can be worked out. They end up getting in front of the judge and the client just starts trying to tell the judge his story, wherein he complained that he had just stopped at McDonald's and so had a Big Mac in one hand and a large Coke in the other hand. His cuff holder wasn't easily accessible, so since both hands were full he clearly couldn't control the fact that he was going 90 plus on a winding country road with a 30 mph speed limit. Our defense for crack possession rested entirely on constructive possession. in that the defendant didn't own the car he was pulled over in, and thereby didn't know there were drugs in it. What he failed to tell us, but freely disclosed during cross, was that he had sold the car that morning for cash, and then borrowed it for an errand. A crack errand evidently. I hope Vince Gilligan is reading this because there's enough here for at least the first season of the Saul Goodman spin-off. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.